Okay, so the idea here, I mean, I wrote this blog post. I was telling Dylan before you got here. This post actually went viral on Hacker News. I wrote it maybe 2 years ago, posted it, and it was on the front page of Hacker News, and it got retweeted a bunch of times. But basically, this is like the method that I use. It's a deterministic method. In other words, it's a playbook that you can run, and it always works. If you follow the steps, it always works. And I love things that are like definitive, where it's just like follow these steps and you know you're going to get to like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you're going to get to G. Like, so what this is, it's really a way of combating what I like blank canvas syndrome, which is like when you start with nothing, it's like, where do I even begin with this process? So this attempts to start at a very high conceptual level that like forget screens, forget interfaces, forget apps, forget all this stuff. And let's start at the very highest level. So step one is this idea of the aspirational press release. So this is something that Amazon has famously, has gotten famous for. There's a book out there called Working Backwards that talks a lot about this. But basically, they do this thing called the PR FAQ. It's a 6-page document. They write it up, and it's a press release within a special format. And so I won't like go into the details of that, but I can just show you. Here's an example one, and this is all linked in the blog post. I'm literally just showing you the blog post right now. But if you look here, this is the one that I wrote when we were doing Charity Makeover. And the idea is you project yourself forward. So if it's going to be, let's say you think it's like a 4-month dev project, project yourself forward 4 months and write the press release that you want to run at that point, looking backwards and saying, okay, we've just launched this amazing app that we propose to build. You know, here's who it's for, here's why it's amazing, here's why you should go run out and sign up immediately. And what that does is a couple of things. It gets you to really think in terms of the value prop of what you're offering. And it's different than, like, I don't know why this works, but it does. The idea of projecting forward and remembering backwards. This is like a famous technique. I actually have a friend, Luke Holman, who developed this many years ago in his book, Innovation Games. He called it Remember the Future. And for whatever reason, like if you try to from today think, well, what do we need to do? That doesn't work. But when you project forward and remember backward, you're able to somehow like reverse engineer what must have occurred by that point. And so don't ask me why this works. I'm sure there is some neuroscience thing to it, but it does work. And so, yeah. And so if you want to read this, like I won't read the whole thing here, but basically this is the press release, the one that I wrote up for us, short and sweet. And it just says, Charity Makeover today unveils Honey and Hive mobile app web applications for enabling knowledge workers, blah, blah, blah. It talks a little bit about like what it's solving, the problem, people crave, what is it? We proved the online format was viable, but definitely not ideal. Participants crave the in-person collaboration, blah, 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 blah. That's what the magic is. So it's just like really like getting your head around like, what is it we're actually solving? And getting super clear on that.
From like elevator pitch.
Yeah, it's like an expanded elevator pitch. And having to write it as a press release really makes you think through things more than just being like, oh, this is what we're going to do. It's like, no, write the press release, like the one you're going to run. So, okay, so that's step one, is just like forget screens, just write the press release. And the output of that, or the goal of that again, is clarity. It's getting very clear on who the stakeholders are, what the value prop is, how do you message this thing, like get all that out of the way. The Amazon format takes it a little bit further in that they add an FAQ to the end of it. So it's like a 5-page press release and then a 1-page FAQ. I don't think you have to go to that extent. I think the press release is sufficient. Okay, so that's step one. Any question on that? Okay. All right, so step two is, now that we've got the press release, we have this high-level document. The next goal is to convert that into a series of what are called user stories. If you've never heard this term before, you can look it up. So user stories are bite-sized chunks that kind of do what the press release does, only at a more granular level. So imagine if we took that press release and we were to then write a bunch of little mini press releases that are attempting to do the same thing in terms of like, we have stakeholder, that stakeholder needs to achieve something. Like, how do we message that? What is it? What's the value prop? So you're essentially condensing, like deconstructing the press release into these user stories or these little bite-sized blocks. And I'll just show you the example that I used here, again, this is all linked. So I use Trello for this. I think it's a good free tool. I'm sure there's other ways to do it, but like here's, they typically follow this format of, as a PM, I should have the tools and workflow necessary to recruit, screen, and approve candidate volunteers for working on my cause. So that's a good, concise statement of, as a blank stakeholder, I should be able to accomplish X, Y, and Z for whatever purpose. And that's like the formula for writing these things. And then if you want to like go into more detail, you click on it and you can expand on that and give a bunch of detail. But really, like the idea here is, let's say we have 3 different stakeholders in our system, 3 different types of people. And like, if we can just summarize the V1, like the basic stuff that each one of those need to accomplish with the most simplest form of our app, then that's what you're aiming for with this. So yeah. Any questions on that one?
There's still big, right? If you go in detail in the cards.
Yeah, I mean, so on these, I went into like, yeah, I'll go into a little more detail. I'll break it out, like they have checklists and stuff. And so you can like express more detail, but all you're trying to do here is really capture the essence of what are the main things that people need to accomplish. And you don't have to think about, again, we're not like thinking about screens at this point. It's purely conceptual. Like, what are the goals here? What's like the testing? When will this app is complete? When this person can do X, Y, and Z.
Or you guys, user stories that are most.
Sorry.
The priority on the use.
Yeah, exactly. So you can see how I have it separated out here. So I have MVP is this column. I have like a working now, like this is immediately what I'm working on. Different versions that I already released here on the right side. And so the goal and basically like the more left you go, the further in the future we're looking. So a backlog is just kind of like this catch-all when if you come up with something that's like, oh yeah, we need to remember to like, at some point we got to be able to accomplish this, but it's not essential, then put it in the backlog. So yeah. And ironically, this project is what was the predecessor to problematic. So this whole thing, it eventually evolved into being problematic. So if we looked at like today, the user stories, I still use the exact same format. This is the user stories for problematic. And I do it now like monthly. You can see I started this one in April 2022. So it's exactly 1 year into it. And you can basically just see every month I start a new column. And you can basically see exactly what was accomplished in each month and what I'm working on now. This is everything that needs to happen before our event in 2 weeks. Like a big kind of catch-all for what I want to get done this, it says winter dev push, it's now spring, but yeah, but same thing. You can see it's all phased out into the, like future releases. So anyways, so in summary, user stories, we're still at a conceptual level, but we're now breaking it down and we're expressing this in kind of a bite-sized chunks with stakeholders in mind and like criterion that will satisfy. So we can say like, yes, this is done because our, our therapist role needs to be able to book an appointment and make sure no conflicts in their calendar and then deliver that appointment. And then, like whatever it is in your guys' case. So you have them broken out like that. A person seeking therapy needs to be able to find a qualified instructor, book a time, right? Okay. All right, so moving on to step 3. So now is when we start to think about screens. And this is where you're going to sketch your first idea of like what the app needs to do. Now like this talks about tech, like Balsamiq is a tool for wireframing in a very like low fidelity format. It decidedly looks like a drawing here. I'll show you. So this is Balsamiq. It's probably the very first one that was invented in this space, but it has like this famously like hand-drawn look to it. And the idea is to keep it lo-fi. You don't want Figma at this stage. You don't want something that is like super high fidelity because there's an attachment to the outcome. It's premature to start thinking about like colors and styles and like positioning and all this stuff. You really want to keep it like very lo-fi because it keeps you detached and you're not also invested in a specific like look.
So, because we are in Figma.
Yeah.
Like before the news story, right? Because we were supposed to show, in school.
Yeah.
So do you think we should rather work on the stomach for now?
Well, I mean, you guys are already there. So I think in your case, because you already have a high fidelity prototype, it could be useful. I would definitely do the press release because that takes like literally you could do it in an hour and probably have that done and like well tested and like everyone. It brings a meeting of the minds, especially in a group when you can all read the same document and be like, do we all believe that this like captures everything, or is there something else that we haven't thought of? But let's get to the point where we can all be happy with this document. And like, that does a lot to just bring a meeting of the minds, which is what you want. I wouldn't go back and like rework it in a low fidelity prototype, given where you guys are at. Like you already have a hi-fi, like pretty nice looking app design. So you just basically skipped over this. I don't,
Because we're thinking about doing the stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, everything we're looking at could literally be done on paper. There's nothing so far that requires tech, but tech, when you use it, it helps. Yeah, like Trello is a great tool. I use it all the time. So yeah. So here's where I used to use Balsamiq, and frankly, these days I just use a whiteboard and I take pictures. I find it easier to stand in front of whiteboard, even like whiteboard over sketching for some reason. I think better when standing at a whiteboard. But this is where I guess it's kind of a matter of personal preference. You find what works well for you. But I would suggest not even worrying. Like there's other things. There's this thing called Wizard, UIZARD. Show you this real quick. So this is another prototyping tool. So this one actually uses what's it called? OCR or machine learning or something where it'll take a drawing and it'll try to turn it into a digital representation of it. Let's see. Well, I'm not going to go through this one, but this is just something else to be aware of, like Balsamiq, if you want to play with it. It's well done, but again, I think it's maybe overkill. Like you can get mired in tech, I feel like, and all we're trying to come up with at this point is just like sketches of the UI. Okay, so yeah, so output of this one, let's see. Let's look at what I have linked here. Yeah, so these are literally, you can see my sketches here of the mobile app. Yeah, so these are literally like whiteboard sketches of what an app could look like. So, cool. You use what? Sorry, what? Balsamiq, yeah. Yeah, and it's like, what's his name? It's this Italian guy who's like a solo founder. He's still like a company of one person, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's crazy. Okay, all right, so moving on. So let's say, assume that we now have a set of screens and it'll basically be like, individual photos of our sketches of what those screens look like. So at this point, here's where we actually go now and we produce a clickable prototype. And I think this one is going to blow your mind. If you haven't seen this one, I find this tool so useful. We use it at all our events. I'm going to see if I can, I'm going to see if I can share my phone screen here. Sure. never remember how to do screen mirroring. I like to learn it every time. Okay. All right, so this is what the app looks like. It's called Marvel. And basically, what you do is you use this and you take photos of the screens, and you end up with a series of these images, and then you just go in and you do this add link. So you can basically like hotspot anything and say, I want to link to, that one should link to this. Oh yeah, and let me actually, oh, well, I guess it doesn't matter. Like, well, let me just do this so the Zoom gets it for the recording.
But this is kind of a big one, right? Because you can already touch on the, I don't know, the buttons and then come to the next slide, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So you guys, the fact that you're already in Figma, like don't retrace to get back to here. But again, if you were to have started at the whiteboard, this is a major jump to not have to design everything in Figma and then link it all up and whatnot. Like you can do this in literally the time it takes you to draw the screens, which it took me maybe, I don't know, 20 minutes to draw those screens, and then photo them, and then boom, like you can see in a matter of minutes, we're like hot linking these things.
I feel like it makes sense. Doesn't Paul know about like those different steps? So like would it make sense for us as well, like to know like okay, first like something like the press release before you actually start on the fig. Because for us I'm like, okay, so how we want that to look like. So I mean there were good results at the end of the class, but I feel like it would have helped to think first thing with user stories and then
Yeah, it's just premature to jump directly to a user interface when you haven't thought through the issues of like, well, who is this for and what does it really need to do, and like how do we message this thing? What do those people care about? Could it be that we learned something during the course of that conversation and writing that press release that we're like, oh, wait a minute, our users are blind, like, or something random like that, where it's like, oh, we really need to rethink like how we're going to pull this off, given who we're serving and given these other variables. So it unearths the process of going through it in these series of steps. It unearths the right questions at the right time. And it's just like the right way to get there. Well, what just happened? There we go. Okay, well, so let me just show you this. So this is what it looks like once you've drawn your screens, you take your photos, and now you've stitched them together using the tool. And so then in a matter of minutes, you now have basically this, which is clickable prototype, go through. This is literally for a new feature. Like this is the big thing that I'm working on now for problematic, the bounty or the benefactor model. So it just gives you a very simple way to get to essentially what you got in Figma once you've done all that work. All right. So yeah, right. So yeah, it's like high return, low amount of work, high reward. Okay. So that is the clickable mockup. And let's look here. Okay, so high fidelity. So now is when we get to the point where once we've got that, and again, the reason for doing this in this sequence is we've invested very little time. We've gotten to a clickable prototype. What does the clickable prototype get you? And I'll just ask you guys if you think you know this. Like, what's the value of that, creating that thing that we can share?
You repeat the step 5,
the thing that I just showed where the screens and it's like it looks like an actual interface, you click on buttons and whatnot, like, so I can share that Marvel app. It gives me a link to a URL and I can paste that in WhatsApp and say, hey, like send it to 5 of my friends and say, what do you think of this? Right.
You can let your friends like test it what you said basically. So
Exactly.
You're not wasting too much time in creating the hack build, and like getting it attached to the design. And but I want to have the button on the top of the boarding because for me it's pretty without like getting it tested first.
Yeah. Yeah, but like that is the value though, right? Like you're able to solicit input and you're able to put something in the hands of your users without a lot of energy expended, and like catching problems before you go down in the wrong rabbit hole is the name of the game. So that is the value of it. Okay, but so now we've done that. So now we're ready. We've got something that's, you know, battle tested. We've got some input on it. Maybe we've changed a few things. We redo the prototype, and now we've like gotten it to a point where we're pretty sure like, okay, this is what needs to be built. So this is where we go to the hi-fi prototype. And so now this is where you guys are now at, is you use a tool like Figma, and you're making like a pixel perfect rendition of what the app is going to look like at that point. And here's where there's like a divergence, and like this is where I like, so I don't use Figma. Like I use, because Bubble, like I'll show you what Bubble looks like. Bubble is the no-code platform that I use to build stuff. And what's neat about it is it's like, it's only slightly more difficult than Figma to like mock stuff up. And yet when you mock it up in Bubble, you can link things together and essentially accomplish the same thing that you can in Figma, only when it comes time to then actually build it and put like a database behind it and make, you know, workflows and actions and all this stuff. Then you're just layering that in. You're not having to like go into a brand new system and start from scratch and build it. It's already kind of built. So you're then just kind of like, you know, polishing it up and adding those features. So yeah, so like this is the problematic web application here with all the pages here. You can see this shows you like.
Is it only for mock-up purposes?
No, this is the no-code tool. This is like literally the live site uses this. If I switch this to live, it'll show you like exactly what the website is. But I'm saying like I can create a clickable like hi-fi prototype in this tool just by dragging all the elements in there and arranging them and making the screens the way I want them to be. But I don't actually have to do the work of figuring out the data model, like creating the workflows, linking all these things, like validating data, like doing all the things you have to do to build an app. I don't have to do any of that to make the clickable prototype. I can just link these screens together and accomplish that. But the benefit of doing it in this tool instead of doing it in Figma is that I've already then done that layout work. And now when it's time to build it, I just have to wire stuff up. So yeah. That
The validation and gathering feedback.
well, it depends on how close you are in your first try, right? Like I would say, don't time limit that. Limit it to like a confidence level. Once you've had a lot of the feedback and you see a pattern and everyone's saying, yes, I can't wait to use this. This is perfect. Like you're seeking a level of like product market fit at that point more than anything.
Maybe at that point, gathering the feedback is expected or raise all positive things, and then at least though you're having those conversations and it's through those conversations. So this is what it's like. It's like you need an excuse to have the conversations. It's almost like everything we're doing in the lo-fi part is just really an excuse to go get us in front of people to then be able to learn what we need to actually build. And so we take our best guess and we save time by not worrying about the hi-fi. We do the lo-fi, and then at the point where we're like pretty confident, now it's like, okay, let's build a hi-fi, because like people, you know, like we're converging on what we believe to be the right thing. Then and only then do we actually switch to making the hi-fi. But what I'm saying with this kind of tangent here, because this is one way to do it, the other way is to do what you guys did and like to do it in Figma, which is totally valid as well. Okay. Like simple mock-up version like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like so like what I showed with the whiteboard, it's a conceptual, right? Like you're not really, yeah, that's lo-fi. Anything that's a sketch or a drawing or a whiteboard, that's all lo-fi. Hi-fi is where we're like now using buttons and styles and colors and like what it's going to actually look like.
But you can also create apps, but you can also like you might do websites and apps and
to my knowledge, and maybe this has changed, but like Figma is still just a prototyping tool, right? It's not, it doesn't have like a database behind it. It's not like Webflow or Bubble or one of these tools.
So with Bubble, you can like actually launch the website, right?
Right.
And Figma, it's still.
It's just to show it of what it would look like. Yeah. 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 And so like, I mean, this is why like I was super impressed that you guys as business students took it upon yourselves to actually learn Figma and pull off prototypes. Like, I think that's really like laudable that you guys invested that time to learn a tool like that. And my position to you guys is like, well, for not much more work, you could learn something like Bubble and then actually be able to deliver the app itself. So,
See, we didn't know about Bubble because he told us you can use the PowerPoint or you can use Figma.
right,
Because probably didn't really think that it's gonna get that far.
right,
I'm not sure like when did you start talking to Paolo and not when did it get serious.
right,
But yeah, it would make sense to start with a Paolo first.
right.
Yeah. But are you gonna do the same again for the staff? Because you're doing the same stuff right now?
Yeah. So I'll do exactly the same thing. I'll help judge the pitches and give feedback and then do a little talk. And then I think what I've learned from this experiment is just in the class, I'll make the offer to to everyone. The exact same offer will apply, and you know, we'll see. Hopefully something, if we can build one or two of these at the next event, that would be amazing. And then it'll be a good case study. I'll be able to like say, hey, look, this is what we did with the last class. So. Cool. All right. So we're on step 5, I think. Yeah. So do you have any other questions on this? Very good. Okay. Yeah, and by the way, I will just give credit where credit is due. This whole idea of doing it in the no-code tool itself, I was using something called a Dalo prior to Bubble. It's a little simpler, like easier learning curve, but less, like more limiting in what you can do with it. And it was literally this forum post where the guy said, hey, you can just jump right into building. You don't need to like prototype it. You can actually prototype it in the no-code tool and then just like link it up so it's a dummy. It's not an actual app. And then like wire it up once you're ready. And I just thought that was brilliant. So I just want to give credit to this guy because that's where I learned it. Okay. All right. So then the last step here is now we have exactly what like pixel perfect version of what we know needs to be built. We've proved that. We've given that one to our user testing people to confirm that. Everyone says, yep, this is it. So now we're ready to build the actual application. Now, if we've done that in Figma, like I said, now we need to transfer it to something like a Bubble or, or maybe we're going to build this from scratch in Python or Swift or whatever. But at this point, if you did it in Bubble, then this is really easy. Now we're just basically wiring things up to the database. And as far as doing all that, I mean, this is obviously where the bulk of the work is in pulling it off. But I mean, I linked to a couple things in here. There's a good Bubble course. Let's see. If it's not in here, I will link it in the meetup. There was a Bubble Udemy course that I found really helpful in just like getting my head around how to do stuff. So, but yeah, that's pretty much the process in a nutshell.
I think it says be a Figma to Bubble for teacher.
Yeah.
So we use Figma, so the way
Yeah. Good question. I've never used it. I know there is or was an import. I've seen it actually. Okay, so that doc that I linked to is no longer there. So that's not a good sign, but I have seen it in the settings. I think under general design import. Yeah, here we go. Import from Figma. So yeah, so you put in your API key and your Figma file ID, and then apparently it will import it. And at least that way you're not starting from scratch. It will like give you those screens. So yeah, so maybe there is actually no, if that works well, then maybe there is no advantage to doing it the way I'm proposing. If you guys are already comfortable with Figma, then just mock it up there and bring it in. So cool.
And let's see, anything else? Yeah, I mean, like Bubble is a whole thing unto itself, in terms of developing. I think at some point you just get your hands dirty with it, and like you guys will definitely figure it out. You know, if you were able to learn Figma, like I said, it's just like a little stretch further to learn this tool. So I'm sure you guys will get it. And if you come to the event and you win, then you will have most of the work done for you, and then you'll just be basically like taking over a project that's already like 80% there. So yeah. So yeah, so that's it. I don't know if you guys want to look at anything else while we have the screen up. I can show you like the latest thing that I just launched, which I'm super stoked on. This is for problematic. Let me show you this. So like right now, I've added 2 of these projects. So these 2 today, Foodworthy and EquiStart were 2 of the Nova SBE projects. And so you can see these. They have a video, they're coded with SDGs and the problems they attack. Anyone can follow along. It shows you like project links, so things like their pitch deck, the Discord channel that I set up. But this is the newest thing that I added here, where it shows the cap table. So it shows who has the tokens. It also shows, well, there's not going to be any trades here. Let me show you one where there is a trade. So if you look at, for instance, problematic, if we look at this one.
They started before they sold the idea to you.
Yeah.
And that's why they're.
Yeah.
We have to upload our idea to the website, right? For
Yeah. Yep. So you go here, go to project-add, and then you can submit your project, and just like a little wizard. And then you just need to send me like the pitch deck, you can either record the pitch and upload it, or like send me the YouTube URL of it, and then the Figma file. And so once I get all those assets, then you just send me your IBAN and I'll pay you guys.
So the pitch deck that we're gonna submit on the website is gonna be exactly the one that we can use. Yeah.
Ideally, no, you can. I mean, like literally up until the minute you're pitching the judges, you guys can change whatever you want. So yeah. But this is also though why like things like Google Slides work really well, or Prezi, where you can just send the link and then you can be working and change it all as much as you want. But so what I was going to show you though is this is what's really cool. So this is a little widget I made that will it will find the trades. So here. So this will show you a history of all the trades in that token. And then if there were any that used like a real currency, which it looks like maybe actually there's none on the live side here. It's on version test, hold on. Because what I'm aiming for is at this next event, the way the judging is going to work, it's really cool. So we proofed this concept at the last one where none of this software existed. We used poker chips and like paper cap tables in the room, and we tracked all this, and we had like people selling services and building logos and doing stuff, and they're getting poker chips and they're buying into projects. And so we were kind of manually doing all this stuff. The capability now exists in the app itself to track all this. And the idea is that the judges, instead of picking a winner, will just make silent offers to the projects. And then you guys will have like 3 different offers and you'll just accept the best one. And then that will set a valuation of the stock of that project. And so the person with the highest stock valuation wins. So yeah. Yeah, so they're impact investors, 5 different people. It's Pedro Guimarães, Domingos Guimarães, Andre Marquette, John Gale, and Rita backed out. So I think we've got 4 right now. So yeah.
But it's gonna be an ideation, right? So do we still have time to get it created, or is it just pitch the idea and then either like win or not win?
Well, so you guys are like so far ahead of the curve. The fact that you already have a pitch deck and a Figma prototype, like that's kind of the end state of this event. So you guys are like starting where you kind of already have all that stuff. But what you can use the event to do is like, there's going to be a lot of experts there. So I bring subject matter experts. So you can use those people and like pay them some small amount of tokens in the project and have them give you their input and craft a business model or whatever. So refine things, work on the pitch. We have a session from 3 to 4 p.m. where you're actually on Zoom calls with people getting like customer feedback interviews. So you're basically gonna have access to like 6 people, 10-minute interviews with different people. And so, yeah, it's just like a way to cram a lot of stuff into a day and surround you with experts, and then you get a chance to win capital at the end of it. Yeah, yeah,
Their overview. Good.
yeah,
Yeah.
cool. All right, so I will stop the recording. And